Hello and welcome to another UXL Teams webinar. I'm thrilled to have you all here today. My name is Colin, and again, it is my privilege to present another episode where we dive into the world of UX management and leadership. I'm here with my co-host, Sofia Rakchovic.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Colin. Excited for today's conversation.
And now I'd like to introduce our esteemed speaker, Josh Deltzer.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Sophia. Hi, Colin.
Hi, Josh. So Josh brings a unique blend of collaboration and innovation to his role as UX manager at Vail Systems. Throughout his career in Fortune 500 companies, he has developed a keen ability to make technology accessible and intuitive. His leadership roles have been pivotal in creating a design-driven culture and process, positioning design teams as key drivers in success in tech companies. Beyond his direct contributions, Josh has also collaborated with industry giants like Google, Microsoft, Cisco, Oculus, and Apple, which has given him valuable insights into what makes teams and companies thrive. These experiences have deepened his appreciation for diverse perspectives and the power of teamwork in advancing technology products. At the core of Josh's philosophy is a commitment to fostering an environment where innovative thinking and outcomes flourish. His leadership at Vail Systems encourages every team member to explore, learn, and contribute to the ever-evolving field of user experience. For over 30 years now, enterprises have relied on Vail Systems, a cloud-based communication solutions to enhance customer interactions and streamline operations. So for everyone joining us from around the world, I'd like to mention a few things as far as how the process goes. First, make sure to introduce yourself in the comments and let us know where you're coming from. And secondly, once we start the webinar, feel free to ask any questions and we will do our best to address those during the Q&A portion of this segment. So please join with me in welcoming Josh. And I guess, Josh, first things first, how you doing today? And is there anything we missed?
No, I think you did wonderful. I mean, thinking about that bio, there's a lot there, and I might have to shorten it a little bit. There's a, I don't get to hear it too often out loud, but I appreciate the introduction. And it's a wonderful day. It's sunny out, and I'm ready to have a great conversation with everybody.
Awesome. I mean, this is going to be a wonderful chat, Josh. As you know, our goal is to really dig into the world of UX management and kind of derive the secrets of what makes great UX teams successful. And so we've been on a mission to talk with as many UX managers and leaders as we can from around the world, from different industries. And so with each one of these, we get some nuggets that we're hopefully able to share with our community. So again, thank you for participating today. As some of you are familiar, we try to go through several topics during this webinar. And so I think today we'll probably hit on about 3 or 4 of those. And the first one that we love to generally start with is just how to hire. Hiring process is such a difficult thing. I've heard this time and time again. It's probably one of the hardest positions to hire for after, say, product management. And so let's just jump right in. So it's my favorite question. Hard or soft skills, which ones are more important to you as a UX manager and why?
It is a difficult place to hire, right? Because design can be ambiguous, it can, be uncertain. And I think it really depends on the environment, right? It depends on who's on the team currently, what their skill sets, what their strengths, where their growth areas are, not as individuals, but as the group, right? So when I'm thinking about what are the needs of either a product channel or a certain project that needs new resources, it's trying to align those things, right? Is it really data heavy? Is it, intensive with the interface design? And so I'm really trying to figure out the skills that are needed, but also for that particular role, but also how it's going to complement the rest of the team, so that way we can learn and grow from each other. So when you ask the question, hard or soft skills, it's really a combination of both, but and the level, right, that you're hiring for. So depending on whether it's an entry level or a senior level or something in between, we're looking for different qualities. So, but the soft skills are incredibly important because they help showcase, if somebody's willing to learn, if they're willing to, get into a leadership role down the line. So I think they're both incredibly important, but I would tend to say more towards the soft skills because you can adapt those as long as those hard skills are also present.
Yeah, a great willingness to learn is absolutely priceless when you're bringing on and growing your team. You touched also upon finding the right skills. Do you have a template or a framework, or how do you know which skills? Is this modeling from your experience of working in past companies? Do who have you looked for, and who have you kind of learned from as far as figuring out what's the right framework or template to do this?
There's so many frameworks out there, and there's so many skill sets that you can kind of create measurements by. And after some of my experiences, I've had a list, which is probably 20 or 25 deep, and it gets to a point to where you can really start to understand at the top category of whether it's user experience expertise, visual expertise, or strategy or research. You start to understand some of the inherent skills that you're looking for, right? And the levels of communication in there, because it's one thing that we can really do the output. It's another thing about how we communicate them and how we can get people to collaborate. And so that's really the thing that I'm looking for. But for the skill sets themselves, it all depends on where the role is. And I try to keep it very basic for the most part, and dig into areas that I think either there are opportunities. So, leadership skills, hard skills for the actual tools themselves, or the environments is important to have familiarity with. But if there's adjacent platforms or tools, such as, if I'm probably going to date myself now, right? But there's been rapid prototyping tools. You've had Xure, you've had Sketch, you've had all these different tools, and you may be a Figma shop, and somebody may only have those other experiences with those tools. It's easy to understand that they can translate what they've already learned into this new environment, and that just because it's not listed as a skill or something that they're familiar with, it shouldn't exclude them, because these environments are usually very similar, and you can transition into them really easy. So I try to make sure that I'm making those correlations in skills and their experience.
So then once you kind of know what you're looking for, and you're ready to start the process of actually interviewing candidates, how do you go about the validation process? Can you talk to us a little about the hiring process and
Sure.
what that looks like?
So you're always going to get probably a lot of resumes from a lot of different areas, and that's really good to have some diversity in that. But there is some initial criteria like that, those requirements, which is for design positions. I always look for somebody that has a portfolio, right? And it's not just that they have a portfolio site. Oftentimes you'll see portfolios that list their entirety of the work, which is great, but I'm really looking for those types of portfolios that showcase to you what your best work is, what you're most proud of. Tell me about, why you're proud of it. Show me the processes, the people that you engaged with. Is there a case study? Were there best practices? Was there frameworks or models that you incorporated into your problem solving? And what were the outcomes? What did you learn from it? And I love to see those things, not just the assets, but the process as well. And that also gives me some insight into how well they communicate, which is one of those soft skills, right? Being able to showcase your designs is one thing. Being able to back that up with reasoning, purpose, and a target for alignment is a different thing that's really important. So I look for those. So once we kind of go through that process, I'll schedule a 30-minute chat, and that chat isn't really to vet those hard skills at that point. It's to understand that culture addition, right? We have a good understanding of our environment, our team, what we're looking to grow. And ultimately, I want to know that we can have a chat. I want to know that you have a passion about what you're looking for, and that you're going to meld well with people. And it's a really quick conversation, because ultimately I'm looking to introduce you to other people, not only on the team, but the organization. So that's the first step. And then after that, I'll usually put people in touch with some key people on other teams or other projects to see what their sentiment is, see if they're going to work well together. And then ultimately we have a design challenge or a design prompt session, which is 90 minutes long. I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with those. Are you familiar with the design challenges?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, so they're pretty common. We run ours a little bit differently. So, for example, there's design prompt challenges where candidates come in and it's the entire team and you don't know what you're doing until you get there. We create a fictitious prompt, right? Not associated with the business, but parallel to kind of that environment that we're hiring for. So if it's really data heavy or analytics heavy or UI heavy, we'll craft a scenario that is similar to that, but not exact. We want to make sure it's fun. We want to kind of stretch their thinking a little bit. And we'll give them this prompt about 24 hours in advance, which is a little bit different because what that does, it kind of aligns it to a real world scenario of, yeah, we get challenges every day, but we usually get a little bit of time to think about them, think about what that approach is going to be, how we're going to communicate our ideas, how we're going to engage with people. So we send that 24 hours in advance, and ultimately how you choose to use that time, that's up to you. If you want to, excuse me one second. If you want to prepare a slide, if you want to give yourself some notes, if you want to kind of work ahead so that way you can present and then ideate together, that's on the candidate. And that helps us understand how you approach certain scenarios, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And are you looking for more what the final output is, or are you looking more for their thinking or their overall collaboration with the others involved in this design challenge?
So it can kind of, we try to make it a little bit fluid if we can, right? Ultimately, it's not about creating that shiny, perfect asset at the end result. During this time, we encourage a couple things. Obviously, we want you to think out loud. If you've got questions, if you're expecting certain, research or findings or use cases, this and that, we want to know what you're thinking, right? We want to understand what questions you're going to ask, what you would expect to be there, and how you would respond if they're not available. How do you approach a situation where you would expect, say, a user scenario to be already complete, but it's not because it's a new concept? And how would you approach that? Who would you involve? What questions would you ask? So it's pretty fluid, to be quite frank. Okay. And we're really looking for that process of thinking and collaboration and how you engage with everybody else, to be quite frank. Are you just the only one talking, or are you trying to engage the experts that are also in there? Because we introduce ourselves, we let each other know what our strengths and our skills are and kind of what we do within the organization.
Okay, and I know that this is a question very near and dear to your heart, is onboarding. So once you've found that right pick and you say, okay, this is the guy, this is the gal for our team, what does that process look like for you?
So I've been a part of organizations where there has been very limited onboarding, and it's almost like a trial by fire, right? It's like, here's the stuff, go figure it out. And I've also been a part of organizations and been, part of teams that just have had it, spelled out to the detail. This is what you're doing each day. These are the meetings you're going to have. But ultimately, often they're always missing the why. They're missing some of that connective tissue. They're really focused towards, getting you up and productive as fast as you can and just integrated. I take a little bit of a hybrid approach in that. While those things are really important to, align towards for those projects in the business itself, making sure that if somebody's coming into the organization, especially if it's an industry that can be complex, such as telecom or and technology and software for certain degrees, making sure that they have an understanding of not just the team they're on and the environment and the tool sets, but also all the things that allowed that organization to get where they're at, because they can be kind of distributed, right? So I make sure that that first week is really about consuming information, understanding that there's a lot here. It could be like a fire hose, and having a lot of empathy towards that, because they're coming into a brand new organization that they probably don't know too much about. They may have read a lot of things on the surface, on the websites or articles, but ultimately those inner workings, those dynamics are incredibly important for them to at least observe and understand how they can kind of find their place to be successful, right? So that first week is all about creating that camaraderie, making sure that they feel comfortable, understanding that there's a lot of things from HR that might be happening, or there's a lot of wikis or manuals or whatever it may be that they're going to have to absorb, and that can be a lot for anybody. So just understanding that there's a cognitive overload that usually happens, and we want to be mindful of that. But ultimately, setting up that first week expectation, scheduling meet and greets with them, telling them, here's your core team, set up some time to, get to meet them, introduce yourself, get to know them a little bit more, and then scheduling those meet and greets with them, having that list so that way they can reach out horizontally across the organization to understand how everybody plays a role, either directly or indirectly in the work that they're going to be doing. So this really shows itself within a 30, 60, 90 type of scenario. But I think the most important thing is that after week one and at the end of month one, I specifically introduce reflection, right? It's the end of week one. You've had a lot of information. Let's reflect on what you've learned, questions that you have, things that you're considering. So that way we can go into the following weeks prepared and with a plan. And I think that's really important to do for the first week and the first month to kind of create that alignment and understanding.
Yeah, and I really love the fact that you included reflections. And do you do it like after a week and then after a month and on, or is it just for the first part?
So I try to incorporate that into the team culture, right?
Mm-hmm.
Making sure that we have time to not just be going, always thinking about the next task, the next problem to solve, but to really kind of take a step back and, appreciate our accomplishments either individually or as a team and showcase those. It doesn't necessarily have to be that, we got the project done and it was a deadline. Those are accomplishments, but I encourage the team and even new team members to look back and say, holistically, what am I proud of this week? It might not have anything to do with work. And that's important because that allows us to get to know each other a little bit more, helps us connect on a different level, and helps us appreciate everybody's interests and where we can kind of create those bonds. So that reflection isn't just professional reflection, it's also personal reflection because that's equally as important.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
And now that we have them onboarded, right, we want to encourage our members to grow their skills. So I'm curious to know, like, how do you navigate the fragmented learning atmosphere in your team?
Yeah. So it depends on the team and it depends on the organization and how it's set up. Some organizations, you'll have a group of designers that are specifically focused together as one unit to tackle these challenges. Other organizations, you might be a single designer in an embedded channel, and you're kind of having to figure it out yourself with the support of other teams, but more adjacent. And so when it comes to that, as a team, I'll take the latter, for example, where it's a little bit more fragmented. As a team, it makes it even more important that we come together and have some sort of common place for learning to advocate for that growth and development. And it could be a number of different resources. There's so many out there. It could be master classes. It could be UXL, obviously, which I'm a big proponent of. It could be different Coursera courses or certifications. But one thing that I do love to leverage and I promote a lot is learning from each other, right? Everybody on the team has a certain skill, a certain strength, and you're there for a purpose. And when I'm creating those teams, we're evaluating and understanding where the growth opportunities as a practice are and how we can complement each other with those skills, right? So you may have one person that is just, off the charts in visual design, and another person that is off the charts in, say, UX discovery, they can complement each other by coming together, learning from each other, and practicing those different things. So there's a lot of different aspects of how you can approach that learning mechanism. But I think the most important thing is revisiting it frequently. And I'm not saying once a month. It should be part of the continuous conversations, whether it's in team meetings, whether it's in one-on-ones, whether it's when you're talking in meetings and they're also there, promoting that type of learning and kind of helping them find those resources. So there's not necessarily one specific source or way that I approach it with. It's really tailored, to tell you the truth.
No, and I think I love it that it's tailored and it's not one unified, I guess, checklist that everyone has to do. But I love the fact that you also connect them together to, share knowledge and learn from each other. But having said that, how do you actually know where your team members stand when it comes to their skill? How do you know who is good at what, and how do you know what are the things they need to work on more?
Absolutely. There's a couple different approaches that I've taken and that I consider during that. One is obviously output. Talk to me about your design. Talk to me about how you got to this position. What did you consider? What inspiration did you draw from? Tell me your reasoning behind this, right? Reasoning has a lot to do about it. And so that's one aspect. But also, a lot has to do with seeing how they interact, right? Are they taking the lead? Are they communicating it well? But are they also taking the time to advance their skills if they recognize a weak area? Everybody has a growth opportunity, right? Myself included, in numerous things. It's what we want to focus on, what we really find that passion in, that kind of gets us going, that we could spend that 30 hours, of minutia, pixel perfect things. That's fantastic. However, what are the other areas? How can we develop that further? And it really comes down to those conversations, right? I hold one-on-ones, and I look to make sure that they're telling me what their needs are, whether it's career development, situational or project related things. And, listening is really key. What are they looking to build, and what can we kind of uncover together to build them even more?
Awesome.
I'm not sure if that's as specific as you were looking for, but
Well, it is. Having one-on-one conversations with them also, I think, helps a lot because you can really dig deeper into what are their motivations to, learn more about, and also what they can learn from you.
Josh, sorry to interrupt real quick, Sophia. How often do you conduct one-on-ones?
So I try to have them weekly.
Okay.
You can't always have them every week. Sometimes, things come up, or but I shoot for every week. They could be either 30 minutes or an hour. I leave that up to the individual, because ultimately the way that I position one-on-ones is that it's your time to tell me what's important, what you want to work towards, what's on your mind, what blockers or challenges, I can help assist. Because from my perspective, whether you're in management or director or executive levels, I see it as, I'm here to be more of a service and a resource for you to connect as many things as I can to help make you successful. It's not me just saying you need to do all these different things and specifically laying it out and just kind of, milling through all those tasks. It's how can I be of service to help you succeed more? And that's what I want to know. If you're having a rough week, let's talk about it. Maybe there's things that I can help out with elsewhere, or maybe there's people that you might feel more comfortable talking with. If it's project related, let's go through it. What's the challenge? Are there different things that are conflicting? And let's think through a way that we communicate these things externally, because it can be really frustrating at times. But ultimately, I spend that time making sure that it's what they want to discuss, right? Not necessarily here's the status update and this is what I want to tell you that's going on. It's what's important to them.
Okay. Appreciate that. Thank you.
And yeah, I mean, you kind of already answered a bit, but I'm more curious about the whole teamwork and what are the ways that you also, encourage the collaborative learning and growth.
So we have a small team and we're growing a practice right now. So there can be challenges in bringing everybody together, but making sure that we create those cadences and expectations is important, right? We have stand-ups like a lot of teams do, but they're not necessarily your traditional stand-ups. Yes, we give some updates about the things we're working on, but it's important that we talk about what our plans, our goals for the week are, right? And talk about our accomplishments from the previous week. But we always try to introduce something new, some sort of topic or conversation. I call them, an IQ question, an interesting question. And it's really to kind of break that, break the, how would I say this? Kind of put everybody at ease, bring everybody to a common point and, find that interestingness. A lot of people consider these icebreakers. They're usually icebreakers for like the first week or two, but they become a better understanding of your team and their interests over time if you just continue them, and allowing people to kind of lead themselves. Put it on them. Say, all right, it's not just me leading the conversation this entire time. Let's have a different rotation. Who's going to lead the conversation? Do it your way. We want to hit on these specific things, but do it your way. Provide some interestingness, but bringing in other aspects of how we can get together and leverage everybody's, skills. That can be difficult in like scenarios where teams are very spread out, right? They're all service channels, and it becomes even more important to really figure out those types of workshops or events or camaraderie things to bring together, elevate the practice, and make sure that you're really not siloing yourself. And so those are things that are important. I see a lot of great teams that I've worked with in the past. That's what they do. That's at the top of their list of things to do every week. And those are things that we're beginning to incorporate into this team as we're really new into that kind of design and experience within the engineering environment. And so it makes it that much more important for us to figure those things out.
Got it. Okay, so now we're going to kind of segue into our next topic. I see that we've already had some questions that already touched upon. That's exciting. But one is, and this is a big one, I think, for a lot of us, I think, especially relevant for you, is UX maturity, especially with an organization. I know that a lot of who we talk to come from companies where it's very software-driven, engineer-driven. And so I'm interested to kind of know how do you bring UX to the forefront at Vail Systems and previous places that you worked before. If you can get into specific examples, would be great, because this is a hot topic for a lot of our community and a lot of managers that I talk to as well.
Absolutely. So it's a challenge, right? No matter how you slice and dice it. Oftentimes you'll be a part of a group or a team or an organization, especially in the software technology world, where engineering and technology is coming first, and ideas are stemming from there, which is fantastic, right? And UX or development or even the teams kind of come in later, right? It's almost like in that delivery stage. You're almost a little bit more responsive. You're trying to position yourself. Ultimately, that goal is to position yourself and your team at the beginning of those conversations. Easier said than done, right? Because there's a lot of culture dynamics happening. There's a lot of processes or teams that are involved, and really trying to navigate into what's happening over in these areas to better identify, okay, if this is how the things are originating, this is how projects or ideas or tasks are originating, and we're just getting looped in the delivery cycle, and we're always trying to go Mach 5, trying to meet the deadlines that we didn't know about. Ultimately, I find myself talking with product managers, project managers, stakeholders, leads, and say, hey, how can we get, more foresight into your roadmap, your planning? What does your discovery stage look like? Because ultimately, I can then have a conversation and say, we're kind of positioned right here at the end of the conversation. We can add more value if we have earlier insights. We don't have to slow down a process because we're asking all the questions at the late stages. Let us help identify and ask those questions early on while you're still trying to figure them out together. They may be technical in nature, but it's going to give us a much better opportunity to understand and create those concepts, those designs, those architectures, those flows. So that way we can align in, is this what you're thinking? Is this what the outcome that you're trying to achieve could be? What are the impacts? And it's really about, for me, making sure that it's alignment, getting as many conversations started earlier on and being a part of those as possible, and being transparent and communicative to anybody on the design team that might be in that channel for that project.
Absolutely. You mentioned alignment, and part of building alignment is sometimes even creating and finding allies within the organization. Who have you found in your experiences oftentimes the best partner for UX as far as getting those kind of things regarding UX to the greater organization itself?
There can be a lot of partners. I think everybody's the best partner as long as they're willing to collaborate. Oh, really? I mean, having open conversations are important, but equally important is identifying or having a champion at certain levels, right? That understands, yes, or at least recognizes the importance of design or experience, user experience to some capacity. They don't need to necessarily understand the entire practice, but all our job is to make sure that they recognize that this is a thing. There was one time I was speaking with a leader, and they said something that just blew my mind early in my career. We were talking about the practice as a whole, and they said, well, I don't know why I need this, but I know I need it. And they were kind of talking about the practice, like UX design, this and that. And it was in the early days of the discipline. And that just really stuck with me, because that right there exhibited a certain level of leadership of, I don't have to understand all the details. I just know that it's a thing and it's going to help my business, and I want to make sure that I'm positioning it better, right? So that's really the point that we, the low bar that we have to achieve is, do they recognize that it's of value and that enough to where they're willing to start investing resources, time, people, consideration, right? That's the big thing. If we can get them to be considering us at certain times, you have your champion. However, there's other times where there might not be one, and you might be it. And that's going to kind of take you out of that comfort zone. And you have to start having those conversations that feel like they're in a different language. If you're not technical savvy, you may have to be talking with engineering leads, and you'll probably be asking a lot of different questions to understand what they're considering, because there's a million different acronyms. But I think that's the trick, is get to know their business, what's important to them, so that way we can align our goals together and create better accomplishments. Does that help?
Okay, I understand. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's it just comes down to basic communication, being willing to stand there and talk through things no matter how long it takes.
Yeah.
And eventually people will come around.
Yeah, I mean,
I know that. Sorry.
I was just going to say, not everybody's visual. Not everybody's, can see the ideas or the concepts just because you speak them. Sometimes we have to work together to see how we can connect in the best way, right? Some people love sketching, and you can talk through it at a one-on-one. Other times it's utilizing third-party or external inspiration to start to align that conversation and bring it closer to home. So trying to figure out how best to create those conversations that resonate and help get
Absolutely.
to those outcomes. That's the important part.
Okay. And I know within your team, you're leading a pretty diverse group of designers. So you have, UX designer, you have product designer, you have writers, engineers, research, and they're basically spread out through different distributed organizational structure, right? How do you ensure kind of effective communication and UX understanding across these different teams?
Absolutely. So you've already nailed it. Communication is key. How we're engaging. Bringing it back to what's the problem we're solving is always important, because you're going to have a lot of different perspectives, right? You may have a technical perspective, you may have a business perspective, you might have a content perspective. All of these are incredibly valid perspectives that need to build into how we move forward in creating that first iteration of a solution. So that's something that I always work to kind of create as best as I can, is those environments. In my mind, I'm thinking, in this meeting, titles don't matter, right? We're all here for a reason. We want to get to these outcomes. And so I want to hear from everybody. I want to encourage everybody not to be silent. I want them to, if they don't understand something, ask that question. If other people are being silent, call on them, ask their perspectives, because often or not, the silent people in the room might actually have the best perspectives, but they may not feel empowered to speak up. And that's part of what, I try to at least coach or mentor into different engagements is get people active, make them feel comfortable, and make them feel that they're there for a reason. They were invited for a reason, and we want to hear from you.
Yeah. I mean, awesome. Thank you. I mean, I will again jump from one topic to another, because I see that we're almost here for the Q&A. But I wanted to ask you what is your secret sauce to building rapport with C-level, and how do you show that, the impact of UX on the business side, and how does it align with the core business goals?
Yes. Measurements, value, vision, right? All the hard things. Alignment, understanding what's important, right? All organizations want to grow the business. They want to increase the revenue. They want to do certain things. They want to create a better work environment or culture. I look at those things as just regular, business to be done. However, what are you really targeting, right? And having those conversations and trying to figure out and being real about it. You don't have to have the answer all the time, right? Sometimes the answer is, let's figure it out together. Let's put our heads together, and how can we create a plan, an outline to get others in position to move, and let's put some measurements on these things. It's one thing to say, yeah, we can create these beautiful designs or this beautiful product, but let's take a snapshot before, let's take a snapshot during and after, and let's start to compare these things. What was the usage? What was the behavioral patterns? How can we qualify the value of the time spent, right? And is it achieving our outcomes? And ultimately, you're going to have one of those wins to continue that conversation. And it doesn't have to be a massive win. It just has to showcase that, listen, we work well together. We can accomplish things together. And ultimately, it's that relationship building, that communication, and that alignment aspect. It can be challenging to find at times, right? But you can really start to understand what's happening around those areas just by aligning those objectives.
So measuring and communicating.
Yes.
I took those two as the main takeaways, right?
And there's a lot of different ways to measure things, and some are really valuable. Some might not be as pertinent depending on the industry or the area you're in. So it's important to understand what measurements are really meaningful in those environments.
That makes sense. Thank you. And before we dive into the Q&A session, one last question from me is, do you have any advice or any like best case practices that concern design handover process? I think a lot of people would love to hear more about that.
Can you repeat that again? Sorry.
Sorry. I was wondering about, do you have any best case practices for your design handover process?
Oh, yes. So we actually have a design review layer. And we have a questionnaire actually for the designers and the PM to consider if we need a design review or just kind of a short informal engagement, right? But when we need a design review, we look at it in terms of a snapshot in time, right? On this design review, we're calling out, who's involved, any resources. We're also calling out what the original ask was, right? In its, verbose form, because a lot of times the ask and the problem are very different, right? So we'll say this was the ask, which might be something as simple as, hey, we need to make this better. How, we understand that could be a number of things. Is it performance? Is it retention? Is it conversion? Is it a number of things? But after having those conversations, we take a look at that original ask and we say, based off of what I'm hearing, this is the problem statement, and really reframing that so that way it's clear and it has a focus and it has an intent that we reiterate during these things. So that way everybody that's on the team, whether it's PMs, designers, stakeholders, technologists, we have an understanding, and we ask, is this correct? Right? We validate that reframing to make sure that we're all in the same frame. And as we go in, we set the expectations, which is during this design review, we're going to be focusing on these specific aspects. It may be in context. You may be seeing all the different things and the layouts and monetization or whatever it may be, but these are the areas that we're going to focus on. And we qualify. This is how we expect the feedback. This is how, the things that we don't want to focus on. And we're going to go through those designs. We're going to annotate them. We're going to clearly communicate them as best as we can. And we're going to be providing that reasoning of those decisions. And then ultimately, we're going to identify those next steps. If there's approvals needed, if there's other design reviews that need to happen, if we need to consider different types of feedback, whether it's from, it could be user interviews, it could be qualitative or quantitative information from different metric sources that might change the direction of that conversation that informs that design. We're going to note those. And a lot of the feedback during these conversations can be incredibly helpful, but it's important to focus on what we're trying to achieve. We don't want to discount any feedback because it's very valuable, but we want to make sure that we're prioritizing the feedback as well, so that way we can make those deliverables, those endpoints. And we want to create that snapshot in time, so that way if we take a couple turns down the road and we say, wait, how did we get here? We're a little off base. We can then look back at the stages of design reviews and how it got from discovery, concept, understanding, the problems to be solved, into the delivery phase and the handoff. And a lot of those handoffs are really important to make sure that we're considering different design assets that get delivered, whether they're for the development team, whether they're for, say, user manuals or user guides or walkthroughs. All of this is important to consider throughout that entire process. Not just the visual artifacts, it's how we communicate them and how people interpret them.
Makes sense. Thank you. Okay, so we shall now finally dive deep into the Q&A. So if there is anyone who wanted to ask, okay, here we go. First question. So do you have some tips on how to get buy-in from C-level that has no background in UX and therefore doesn't understand its importance?
Yeah, that's a challenging one. If I had to give any advice on that, it's storytelling, right? it's not necessarily about always qualifying. This is your return. This is why it's important. This, fact. It's about making sure that you're making a connection that is resonating with that person. It can be challenging, right? Because you may not interact with that individual all the time, and then you may just get that one shot. But there's things that we can do. We can kind of do that secondary research to better understand what motivates them, right? What's important to them, what might be top of mind. And ultimately, it's about connecting on a certain level to establish certain levels of trust that may not be immediately for that thing, but it's getting you closer to that end stage of that investment, right? Sometimes that doesn't work. Sometimes you have to be direct as well, which is, listen, here's a big gap. We've identified this big challenge, and based off of what we're seeing here, we believe that we can close that gap by doing either bringing in more revenue, saving you more time, more efficiency, streamlining processes, being more appealing to our target demographic or customer, right? And what's important? It's about that alignment there. So ultimately, how can we create that story that resonates with them in a meaningful way?
Thank you. Let's see what else we have here. Okay. How would you keep your team members motivating most of the time? There are times when team member might feel bored. How do you keep your team member encouraged to keep learning on a regular basis?
I think it's common, right? We all get burnt out sometimes, right? But ultimately, it's for me at least, it's understanding why are they bored. Is it the content? Is it the practice? Is it the discipline? Is it that it's just not interesting because they might be really interested in design and they're just doing website assets, but really figuring out that they're interested maybe in 3D design or game design. We can make those associations, even though it may not be directly, towards this workflow or this project or what the company does, but we can take those learnings and kind of funnel them into how they apply over here, right? And because a lot of these things are foundational, they're based off of principles, and I think making sure that we're engaging often. We don't have to micromanage, but we certainly don't want them to stall out, right? So if you're noticing that, hey, we had a big month of learning and then people are starting to taper off a little bit, that's okay. It can ebb and flow a little bit. But ultimately, if you're looking at the long term, which is how did we do this year rather than this week, right? I think that's the big thing. And trying to align that learning path the best that you can, that inspires them, that motivates them, and trying to connect those dots of how it can apply to the things that they're doing already. I think that's the trick. And it's going to be different for everybody. But ultimately, just knowing that there's these common threads that you can associate in different types of learning is important.
Okay, next one. I'm a co-founder and design director for a small 4-person product startup. We have gained hiring budget for 1 person. Typically, do you look for a so-called unicorn rockstar ninja or whatever they're calling it these days, or do you focus on a candidate who does 1 or 2 things really well?
That is a great question. So I'm reading it still. So that's a tough spot, right? The things that I would consider is, those 1 to 2 things should always be top of mind, right? But ultimately, are they diverse enough? Are they willing to learn? Are they willing to kind of expand that horizon a little bit more to really encompass maybe that leadership role? To be in that leadership role, it doesn't mean that you're directing or managing. It just means that you're willing to learn something new that is out of your comfort zone for the time being to get it done. It may not be the thing that you're there to do, and you certainly shouldn't put that on you indefinitely because you did it one time, but is that capacity there to be flexible? And as long as that one or two things they're really great at and they can exhibit it time and time again, I think that's important to recognize.
Okay, how do you ensure good communication and collaboration with engineering team, ensuring true to design product?
Frequency. It's always a challenge because it's easy to have your technical stand-ups or design stand-ups or these siloed meetings or isolated meetings. I think the trick is that if they're having a technical team stand-up, show up. You may not understand everything that they're talking about, but it gives you an opportunity to at least open the door to questions and perspectives. How does this impact this thing over here? Do we need to consider this? Does this get surfaced up into the interface at any point? And at least you're starting to get an understanding of how their process of engagement happens within their team, and you're really getting closer together and understanding each other's work. And I think that's ultimately the big key is, while we have a practice that we're trying to develop, ours can't develop without yours, right? So I want to make sure that I have the best understanding of what's important to you, and so that way I can work to align our greater objectives together to create a more cohesive unit and understanding. Because ultimately, you're going to learn something about design, I'm going to learn something about technology. Together, we're going to learn how we can work best together. And if there's opportunities to integrate, say, tools or softwares or platforms that can make each of us do better, that's ultimately kind of how I approach that, because it is very dynamic. But not being afraid to just be present and ask a question and understand what the teams are doing, because that's going to allow us to do what we do best, which is help the problem solve. And if we don't have all those aspects of understanding, we're isolating, or we're kind of limiting the potential of that solution.
Okay. I have one question. We'll jump to some more right after. So I apologize for everybody for butting in. Josh, we talked a little bit about ongoing learning education. How do you get buy-in, or in your past, so either right now or in your previous positions, do you get buy-in from stakeholders, the C-suite executives, to incorporate that into your upskilling of the team? So, you mentioned you've used previous tools from, Coursera to LinkedIn Learning to UXL to many other platforms out there. How did you go about selling that vision and getting buy-in?
Retention is important, right? Especially in today's day and age. And this doesn't happen everywhere, but you read the headlines wherever, there's layoffs or there's companies downsizing or whatever it is. Great teams really work, and great companies really work towards retention. And part of that retention is helping people feel that they're valued by allowing them to grow, right? Some people, they want to get into a position and stay there. Other people, that's their starting point, but they want to grow, or passions may change. Making sure that we're providing that type of culture, that environment, that acknowledgement to do so is really important. And when I think about how you bring that up to, say, that executive level, it's, our investment doesn't stop at a salary. It goes beyond that. We're investing in people because people are the most important resource that can help us get to our goals together. And ultimately, if we can provide a stipend, if we can provide different resources that actually get utilized, and rather than just throwing them out there, let's look at the utilization. Let's engage them. What was important? What are you doing with it? Can you utilize that to teach others? Create some workshops, some luncheons.
Absolutely.
So,
and if you can create a culture around it, where it's as you mentioned before, building a camaraderie, it's even better.
Absolutely, because you're going to be able to learn from everybody else. You took that master course, or you listened to that webinar, or I saw that tidbit. Interesting. How do these come together? How can they play off of each other? How can I learn from somebody else's learnings at the same time, right?
Totally. Okay, so I think there's one more question. We have time for one more question, then I think Sophia, you'll have a few more words to say.
Yeah, we have one more question from Carol. So how do you advocate for the design team when the company doesn't really understand the importance of user experience?
You show them, right? Sometimes the process of design thinking or needs to work in tandem with systems thinking, right? The organization might be systems or service model or mindset, rather than just only defending, the hill that we're on. It's, hey, how can I adapt my model, my understanding of how we get there into what they know to be true and what they've had success in, right? You'll find a lot of situations where it is just that you've got different models, service versus design or whatever it may be. And, rather than trying to overhaul, how can we optimize it together? How can we showcase that this can be included and that there's value, that discovery delivery phase. So if they don't necessarily recognize the value of it, I think it would come back to storytelling as well. Have you ever, think of a situation where, have you ever encountered, a product that didn't give you good instructions and you were trying to put it together and it just did not turn out like the picture you got? How frustrated were you in that moment, right? Did you actually put that thing together, or did you toss it out and leave a bad review? Well, with good design, with good experience, with good content writing, with good processes, your success rate would be that much greater through that communication and those expectation settings. Try to resonate with something that they can understand, that ties back to design and that value. Because ultimately, we've all had those experiences, whether it's big or small. I was having a conversation the other day similar to this, and which was, imagine if all the parts in your car were not labeled, unbranded, and you had to replace that part. How difficult would that be? You'd probably try a couple different versions until you got that new battery that actually fit, right? Everything that we see on there, the labeling, the product numbers, the installation, the instructions, all of that ultimately is a combination of systems and design thinking and content on how we help people accomplish that task and goal, right? So take out the design and just only leave the function. There's a big question mark there on whether or not we can actually complete that task in a timely and expected manner. So try to resonate.
Nice. Thank you. Okay, so we have only like 2 minutes left. So I would like to use this time to thank everyone for joining today. I hope that these insights from Josh helped you a little bit understand more about like how we can build great design teams. And also, Josh, again, a big thanks from us for taking the time today to join us and share your advice. Hope this was a good experience for you as well. But yeah, before I send everyone off, just a few quick notes. The webinar is recorded, so everyone will receive a recording link to watch whenever they want. You will also receive key takeaways from the webinar in your inbox. And one more thing is, and the last thing is that we have a new webinar coming soon, so please stay tuned for the announcement. And yeah, with that, thank you. That's all for today, and see you next time.
Excellent.
Josh, thank you
Thanks
for
for
everything.
Thanks, everybody.
Goodbye, everybody.